Every now and then we get a chance to do this, and what I'm going to do is walk through some of our images of Georgia and Florida through the years. You'll get a chance to see how the game and all its pageantry and so forth has looked through the years. I'm only starting in about 2004. I didn't start photographing this game until 2003, and you'll see a couple of things. First of all, you'll see that my photography has gotten significantly better over the last 20-ish years. And you'll also see that the photo gear has gotten better. And I'm going to tell you the story behind each of these moments in the history of the cocktail party. This first picture is of Leonard Pope, who went on to go have a very successful career in the NFL. And this is at the start of Georgia, Florida. You can see by how blurry or how bright it is and slightly blurry Fred Gibson is that two things are going on. Number one is first, it's the beginning of the game. Secondly, I have the wrong exposure here. But anyway, Georgia had been really beaten up from 1990 all the way until this particular game. They had won once. So that was in 1997. And I mean, it was Georgia would go down there with a better team and lose. Georgia would go down there, with about the same team and lose. Georgia would get blown out at home, get blown out on the road. They just could not figure Florida out. And they had won the league in 2002 and the Sugar Bowl. Their only loss was to Florida. This game right here, Florida had just fired their head coach, who was Ron Zook. They had lost to Mississippi State on the road, I believe it was. And coming into Jacksonville, Georgia had a lot of momentum. They had lost to Tennessee earlier in the year, but they really felt like they could still get back to Atlanta and beyond. This was a very good Georgia team in 2004. David Pollock and David Green's final season at Georgia. Fred Gibson's too. But Leonard, you can see the Florida player holding his hands out like where, what was supposed to happen there to one of his teammates. Hey, look, it happens. Sometimes you don't get the play that you want to happen defensively, and what can you do? What can you do? Anyway, that's a look at the 2004 game. In 2005, this is actually an exceptional picture, if I do say so myself. And that's because if you see in the background there, that is Lee Corso of College Game Day. And Lee Corso, this was game day was at Georgia, Florida this year, and as you can tell, that's Joe Tereshinski, Georgia's backup quarterback, is in the game. Why is he in the game? Well, DJ Shockley had gotten hurt 2 weeks. I think it was either 2 weeks or the week before against Arkansas in Athens, and uh, Joe was the starting quarterback, and they could not score. I mean, they were having a very hard time scoring. He was not a traditional quarterback. They ran the ball a ton in this game. This was the only touchdown Georgia scored in the game. It was a pass. It was a trick play from Tyson Brown. Tyson Brown, good God. From Thomas Brown, Tucker High native Thomas Brown, who is now currently with the Los Angeles Rams as their offensive coordinator, I believe. He threw the ball to Joe, who tumbled into the end zone on a play that was just frankly amazing to see. Now Florida got out here. This was Urban Meyer's first game as Florida coach against the Dogs. They got out to a 14-0 lead and had to hold on to win, but they did. And this was one of the two regular season losses Georgia had that season. This team went on to win the Southeastern Conference Championship. I mentioned Lee Corso to say this. I could not go to the Georgia-Florida game in '06 because of a wedding. It's one of the few games I've missed in my 20 plus years of covering Georgia. But I believe it was in '07, I printed the thing out. I printed this image out and showed it to Lee. I was trying to give it to Lee, actually. If anybody from ESPN sees this, and I was trying to give the image to Lee Corso, and he said, "Well, He took it and signed it and gave it right back to me. It was kind of an amazing moment in just happenstance for me when Georgia and Florida played that season in Jacksonville. It was, but that one play was captured here. I mean, it was an amazing play. Well, everybody should recognize what's going on here. This is No. Marino on Georgia's first offensive play of the game. Excuse me, or first offensive drive of the game. You see Clint Bowling, Sean Chappis, that's Jermaine Cunningham in the background for the Gators. And moments after this, the world exploded. And it looked like No. Sean had gotten in. As you can see, I was right basically on the line. But this is maybe an image that is not as, I don't use it as much. Of course, this was 15 years plus about 15 years ago now. But that was a Georgia team that just could not. It was very young. They were a very young team. And with that said, here is the next image of the entire team piling onto the field. So that's DeMarcus Dawes, Muhammad Massaquoi. Joe Cox is my favorite person in this image because he is super pumped up, let me tell you. And you know what? The story behind the image, Rennie Curran is there on the far right-hand side, Blake Barnes, number 15, is that Mark didn't think that Georgia was playing to its full potential in terms of like what they should be doing on the field. This was a team that needed a field goal to win at Vanderbilt, a game they probably should have lost. They got blown out by Tennessee, but they had beaten Alabama on the road. They had beaten Oklahoma State. They had cleaned Oklahoma State's clock, and this team was just trying to figure itself out. From this moment uh, all the way until the Alabama game in '08, Georgia was the best team in the country. The problem was that was not one season, it was two. And they absolutely destroyed Florida this day. Tim Tebow, I think this was the game he cried. He cried a couple of times at Florida. I'm pretty sure he cried this game. And it was, it was a game that will always be remembered. Now, Florida people will talk about the next year. And of course, the Gators had won the national championship the year before and the year after this moment. And that was a great win for Florida in '08, no doubt about it. But no one talks about that. They talk about this moment in Georgia curb stomping the Gators. And it really aggravates Florida people to be sure that this is the moment that people remember from probably the 2000s more than any moment. But I mean, honestly, as a photographer, it was hard to tell what in the world was happening. It was dangerous. It should not have happened. I'll just say that real quick. But um, Mark was trying to motivate his team. He did. Um, and to see the entire team come onto the field, it's a moment that we still reference today at Dog Post, which is shoot through the celebration. Don't stop shooting just because the play has ended. Shoot through the celebration. This is from 2012. And these two young men, actually, there's three Georgia players in this picture. And one is Jordan Jenkins up at the top there. These three guys are actually very close friends. Jordan Jenkins up at the top, who played in the NFL. John Theus is at the bottom. That is his brother Nathan, number 49. And this is moments after Georgia. I'm actually going out of order here. This is moments after Georgia won the 2012 game. And Florida and Georgia have really for years collided. And this moment, two brothers on the same team celebrating with one of their close friends with the fans. I told John after the game and years after that this is an image that it will live on forever. And it's just, it was a crazy moment. I actually did not know I'd gotten this until after the game. So anyhow, I kind of went out of order there. With that said, here is an image that I think is one of the best I've ever taken at Georgia, Florida. Okay. I mentioned earlier that Georgia had gone for such a long time without beating the Gators in 2004. Well, then they beat them in seven, but they took three losses in a row in '08, 9, and then in overtime in 10. And it was all on the line in 2011. I mean, had Georgia not won this game, Mark Richt would have been let go. Had they not won the East, Mark Richt would have been let go. And this, to me, I don't know if this is a moment, but the Dogs got down in this game 17-3. Okay, now that's going on memory. Someone can correct me. But they got down off just like a long kickoff return for a touchdown, I think it was, or a long kickoff return. But this was them coming back in that game. You can actually see Will Muschamp in the background on the right-hand side. This is Georgia coming back in the game and the series and reasserting itself in a way that had not, frankly, since the 80s. And from this moment on, Georgia's won all but 3 games, I think. So they won in 11, 12, 13. They lost in 14, 15, and 16. Oh, excuse me. Since this game in 11, they've won all games but 4. So because the Gators won in 20. So this is Orson, who had been tackled, and the guy wouldn't let go of his leg when he was standing up. And it fired Georgia up more. Um, and they were defiant that night. They wanted to win, and it was a bunch of fourth down conversions from Georgia that got them the W. Back to the 2012 game, and I think these are two old school South Georgia guys. The person hugging the player is Mike Bobo, and Mike Bobo was the quarterback at Georgia from 1995 until 1997. He was the offensive coordinator at Georgia from 2006 until he left to be the head coach of Colorado State in 2015. The player on the ground is Malcolm Mitchell. It is hard to describe how emotional and how important Georgia Florida is. I think this image somewhat captures it. That night, Georgia was the number, I think, 7 team in the country, and the Gators were number 2. And Georgia had not been playing well. And Malcolm exploded through the Jacksonville night on a 3rd and medium and took it the distance through the Gators. And Mike Bobo found him after the game and literally tackled him to the ground, screaming and yelling with joy. And Malcolm's expression there, Malcolm went on to win a Super Bowl, and I'm sure that was special for Malcolm. But I'm just going to tell you right now, this image, I think, shows the emotional, why the game is so important for Georgia. It is so important for the Dogs, their fans, and everybody. And that Mike would tackle Malcolm Mitchell like this, that Malcolm exploded through the night. And soon thereafter, Jarvis Jones made the game-clinching play, causing a fumble with the Gators near the goal line. That is one of the all-time great Georgia-Florida games in 2012. I mean, it was a colossal fight, and Georgia came out on top. It was something else, let me tell you. I lived it. And here, I mean, speaking of the 12 game, again, Georgia-Florida has always been a clash of titans. But in this particular image, Sean Williams, who's the player on the right, is talking with Mark Richt. And I don't talk about stuff after games that I hear because I just don't think it's appropriate, okay? But 10 years later, I can say, Mark was telling Sean in this moment, and I remember exactly what he said. He said, "You will never forget this the rest of your life." And he was, I mean, I don't know if he's right or not. I'm sure Sean still remembers it. But that week, Sean was very aggravated with the way the Dogs had played. And he came up midweek. I think it was the Wednesday press conference, but it might have been the Tuesday one after practice. And he was pretty candid about how they were not living up to their potential. And Sean did not talk a lot. And that game, though, him and the Dogs were, up against the wall. And he basically cleaned it up by saying, "Hey, we're too soft." Here's what he said, very specifically. He said, "We got to stop playing soft. We're playing too soft defensively. That goes for the defensive line, the linebackers, corner safeties. I don't know. We're not playing with the same attitude we played with last year. I don't know what it is." He went on to say, If I were the coaches, I can't tell them what to do, but I'd have a Marlowe in the game more. A Marlowe Herrera. I wouldn't take him out. I'd leave him and Ogletree in the game. That's what I want. Me as a player, I want to see a Marlowe in the game, a Marlowe and Ogletree at linebacker. I don't want to see anybody else in the game at linebacker. And that, I can assure you, I can confirm, that rubbed some people the wrong way. But it fired the team up and got them. I cannot tell you. Georgia and Florida have had a lot of really big games. I'm not sure they've ever had a game bigger than 2012. This next image is an image of a guy that I have shot a lot. I shot Aaron Murray more than any Georgia player probably. And this does not look like a spectacular image. And quite frankly, it's not. You could take this with an iPhone. It just goes to show that F8 and be there matters more than anything else. This is Aaron with the Dogs up 3. And Georgia's defense has just forced a 4th down punt from the Gators. And Georgia had gotten up on the Gators pretty solidly. I think they were up 20-0 on them. And they had to hold on to win this game. But in order to do that, Aaron and Todd Gurley had to kill off 9 minutes of the clock. And they did. This is Aaron before he went back on the field for the last time against the Gators. This is a Tampa native who is the only quarterback at Georgia in the previous 3 decades to have beaten the Gators 3 times. Now, Jake Fromm did that since, but it wasn't the same. I'm just going to tell you straight up, it wasn't the same. And Georgia had much better teams than Florida at that time. And this was to Georgia, Florida, where the teams were very similar. In 11, they were close. In 12, they were definitely close. And in 13, they both were not having great years. And this is, I think this is one of the best images I've ever taken of Aaron. And it's really not a great image, frankly, in terms of composure. But you can see the night sky in Jacksonville. This is what happens. You want to have the lead when the horses come out. The Jacksonville Police Department comes out on horses. You better have the lead. And as you can see, it's hitting twilight on the St. John's, and that's an image of Aaron Murray just before the Dogs win it. This is a few years later. This is the 2017 Georgia-Florida game. That's your boy DeAndre Walker about to kill Felipe Franks. I don't know if this is the fumble from Felipe or not, but this is in 17. And the Gators wanted 0% to do with this game. They were disinterested. Their head coach was about to get fired the next day. It seemed like it was about to get fired. And Georgia was out for blood, and they got it. They got 21-0 in the first quarter. That's one of the only games I've ever seen where the Gators had no interest in being there. I could tell before the game they knew they were going to get beat, and they just in warm-ups you could tell. And I never say that about teams. But that day, Georgia was going to absolutely pummel the Gators hard, and they did. And this is just one image of a lot of Georgia running all over the Gators that entire day. Now, that is a year after Georgia had lost 3 years in a row, and they throttled Florida that day. I do remember Jonathan Ledbetter being very upset that the defense allowed the Gators to score in the fourth quarter, the second and third team defense. He was very aggravated. But this is DeAndre Walker, famous Georgia outside linebacker who is coming. And it wasn't just him, but you can see the other guys too. All right, this is a wide shot. We do this sometimes. This is the close of the 2018 game. Georgia and Florida don't always play when they're top 10 teams. This is one of those games, though. 18, 19, and 20, back to back to back, Georgia and the Gators were top 10 teams. And Florida was a slight underdog in this game, maybe about 6. Slight might be the wrong word. But they had the lead in the second half. They got up, I think, 17-13, something like that. Felipe Franks with a big ball and just hit it. And then the Gators were on the lead. But as you can see, Georgia by this point was dominating the game. This is late in the game after Terry Godwin had scored a touchdown. And Georgia had gone up, I think, 31-17. And as you can see, the entire Florida sideline, the entire stands of the Gators is empty. The number one thing you want to see when you're in Jacksonville is the other team's seats are teal. You want to confirm that the other team has teal seats because then you know the game's over and you're waxing them. Right here in this play, this is DeAndre Swift slicing through the Gators one last time in that game. And it was an amazing moment for Georgia, just throttling their rival, a team they do not care for at all. But that's a look at the stadium from above as Georgia goes on top once again against the Gators. This image is actually one of the best pictures of Kirby Smart out there. And you can see, I'm not going to name all the people here, okay? Because some of these folks, I don't think they want their faces, But this is Lawrence Cager, who is improperly, he is not in focus, but Kirby Smart is. And this was not a trick play, but this was a play in the fourth quarter. You're never going to play this game and one team just kills the other. I mean, that might happen twice a decade. Most of the time, one team gets knocked down, they get back up, and they're ready to fight. In this case, Georgia had outplayed the Gators, but the Gators had come back, and the game was, if I'm not mistaken, it was 17-10 at this moment, or something like that. And Florida had a lot of momentum. This is late. This was early in the fourth quarter, I believe, and Jake Fromm held the ball for what felt like 10 minutes, but it was probably about 5 seconds, and Lawrence Cager came wide open on the Georgia sideline. And Jake hit him, and you can see Kirby's reaction. You can see Kirby's reaction there. This image, more people contacted me about this image who were in it than any image I've taken lately because of the back focus. And but I think sometimes when you miss a shot, you get a shot, and certainly you would be shooting Lawrence Cager in this case. Look at Lawrence. I mean, Lawrence's feet are not on the ground. Guess whose else are not? Kirby Smart's. Kirby's hands are up. He knew they'd won the game at that point. I think kind of everybody did. Now they did have to complete a couple first down or third downs late, but this was a Georgia team that closed it out against the Gators late in the game. This is our final shot. This is from the 2021 national championship team for Georgia. That is the Anthony Richardson. Sometimes, again, you can get really harsh sunlight in Jacksonville, but this is Nolan Smith, number 4 for the Dogs in white, literally taking the ball from Anthony Richardson. And it started or was in the midst of a defensive explosion, the likes of which the Gators never came back from. I mean, Florida played Georgia pretty hard in this game. And then all of a sudden, Georgia's defense happened. And it was Nolan in, I believe, back-to-back drives. It was back-to-back drives. I don't know if it's back-to-back plays, where Nolan changed the game. And I don't want to pull back from this image further. I cropped it in relatively tight, and you can see it's a little bit soft. But there were 9 Georgia players around these guys. Four Dogs are tackling Richardson right now. You can see the 4 red helmets. The one behind Richardson's harder to see. That's in the shadows. But this was a Georgia team that relied on its defense to win the national championship, and you can tell it from this image. That's our look at Georgia and Florida, sort of the picture behind the scenes of these images through the years. It's one of the all-time great rivalries in sport, not just college football, and that you have 50-50 crowds, that the teams are just really legendary programs, and that they've been doing it for close to 100 years in Jacksonville. All of that combines for it's really a special game, a special moment. And I can assure you, having done this for nearly a quarter century, there's no bigger win for Georgia in the regular season than the Florida Gators. Thanks for watching.